Welcome to my interview with Dacher Keltner, professor of psychology at the University of California in Berkeley, where he runs the Social Interactions Lab and also founded and still directs the Greater Good Science Center. Among many other things, we talked about the science of happiness, Dacher's own experiences as a father, and compassion. Have fun and enjoy our interview.
I have two daughters. One is 18 years old and about to go to college, and her name is Natalie. And then I have another daughter, Serafina, who is 16 years old and is heading into her second to last year in high school in the United States. Oh, having children has been the biggest source of wonder and compassion and discovery of anything that I've ever done. So it's really defined my emotional life. The most inspiring moments when you're a parent of a young child, when our girls were 1 and 2, is when you have them close to you. When they're literally you're carrying them, or they're sleeping on your chest, or they're walking on your back, or you just feel like you're encircled in this little world just with them. And then as they start to get older, what becomes really inspiring is play, is really just the magic and the imagination of play, just putting on funny clothes and doing funny things to your hair and drawing and going into character. And now that our girls are older, it's really about discovering the world. It's really about, talking to them about politics or nature or social issues or moral issues, and just starting to kind of independently be citizens of the world. So it's just been, there's a lot of struggle to parenting, but it has been the most inspiring thing I've ever done. I think it's fundamental to, when you start off being a parent, to remember that people mean well and they want to do good in the world. And then the scientific evidence is, that I write about in Born to Be Good and that it's been generated since then, is really, I mean, in a way, a human being's first move with other people is to be cooperative and kind, right? And we share prolifically, cooperate a lot, we are altruistic, we'll sacrifice. And I think that if you start from that assumption that your child is wired to be good, and you do things that bring that about, right? Those tendencies in your children become much easier for them to express when they get older. So I think it's fundamental to just first assume that your child is not adversarial and your child is not a little psychopath or a demon, but your child is really born to be good. When I started to write Born to Be Good 7 or 8 years ago, there was this new science of kindness and compassion and altruism that was really starting to take shape, and it was a reaction to an earlier set of assumptions about what human beings are, that we are competitive and ruthless and violent, and that our altruistic tendencies are kind of created by culture. And then along came this new science of human compassion and altruism, and I think that it generated several different kinds of evidence that people are born to be good. The first is really just behavioral data, right? So if I give $10 to you and ask you how much would you like to share with a stranger, and you can share as much as you like or as little as you like, people share about 50% of a resource. So we share, right? We tend to cooperate. If you study little children, this is Felix Wernicke, and you have put them in a situation where an adult is struggling to try to get something done, the little 1-year-old or 18-month-old will try to help that adult, right? So the behavioral data show that we cooperate really frequently, we share really prolifically, we try to assist other people. So that's one kind of evidence. And then the other kind of evidence that I think is just as persuasive, that I write about in Born to Be Good, is that if we are designed to be kind, we should have genetically based systems in our body that evolution has produced that build up specific systems in your nervous system and in your brain that help us be kind. And what we're learning is about things like oxytocin, which is a neuropeptide in your brain and in your bloodstream that helps you cooperate, right? We're learning about, in our lab, the vagus nerve, which is the largest bundle of nerves in the mammalian, in the human nervous system. It wanders through your throat, goes down into your chest and slows your heart rate, and then wanders through your digestive organs and into your immune system. And the vagus nerve helps you communicate with people, it helps you look at people, slows your heart rate, and it's engaged or it's activated by compassion, right? So we're learning that not only do we behave in kind ways, but those behaviors are supported by old physiological systems produced by evolution. The really striking thing, in the science of kindness, or why we're wired to be good, about 20 years ago, scientists started to study this little chemical called oxytocin, and it's a sequence of 9 amino acids. It's produced in your hypothalamus, it projects to your brain, it goes through your bloodstream into your body and through your organs. And scientists early on, anatomically, they knew that oxytocin was involved in really taking care of babies, right? So uterine contractions when you're giving birth, milk letdown, breastfeeding, skin-to-skin contact, just the intense, the most physical, raw stuff of caring for a child. And then what happened is people working with non-human species started to find that that chemical that supports caring of little babies really also supports cooperative relationships, right? So if I give a mammal oxytocin, it'll take care of things. If you give human beings a little whiff of oxytocin with a nasal spray, they will share more abundantly with strangers, right? If you give somebody oxytocin, they're better able to read what other people are feeling. They're more empathetic. And then there are these really interesting studies that show that oxytocin is involved in cooperative bonding. So, if you get a nice pat to the back, or somebody says, "Nice job," right? Or "You're a great friend," that will activate, some studies show, oxytocin release. And it kind of gives you this feeling of oneness and sort of aligned interests and friendship that is the foundation of happiness. The question of why is it so fundamental for parents to hold and touch their kids and to use touch in play, right? We do a lot of funny things through touch. We tickle and we wrestle and so forth. It's fundamental touch is fundamental to a child's sense of identity and what the world is about. So when you think about it, when a child is born, the most well-developed, activated sort of sensory system is touch. So they're taking in all this information about the world when they first enter into the world with touch, right? Breastfeeding, skin-to-skin contact, being held. When you think about in our hunter-gatherer societies, babies were held most of the time for the first 3 or 4 years of life, right? They're constantly in physical contact with other people around them. And what we know is that when you are touched in a really friendly way, that sends signals to your orbital frontal cortex, which is a part of your frontal lobes that helps you understand what your social world is. It sends signals to your somatosensory cortex, which is these layers of cortex up here, which help you represent how you're being touched. And what the child is learning through touch first, more important than words, more important than sight, is who's my society, right? Who are my parents? Who is protecting me? Who can I trust? Parents are designed to feel compassion for their kids, right? And one of the things that we've learned in the science of compassion is that one of the fundamental things that parents do is they raise kids, right? As they have little 2-year-olds, and then they have a brother and a sister who are 4 and 6, and they're arguing and so forth, is parents feel very committed to teaching their kids how to be compassionate. And the studies are finding that it's really hard, right? But if you get in there with your kids and you engage them in reasoning about other people's suffering, if you talk to them about how they may have harmed a sibling, right, a brother or a sister, and reason through their feelings of compassion, what you're doing as a parent is you're getting the child to start to sort of engage this emotion with really important reasoning processes about what's fair in the world, how should they treat people, what's the nature of respect, how do you sort of see the common humanity in other people that you share with them. So in a way, compassion and how parents engage in their children's suffering and compassion and feelings about these things is, I mean, in many ways, it's the most important thing that parents will give their kids, is this ability to reason with compassion. You know, as I was doing the science of compassion and writing Born to Be Good, I was also right in the middle of being a parent, you know, and I had these young daughters and watched them go to school and watched them have friends and all this, the joys and difficulties of social life, right? And I realized, you know, we know scientifically that if a young person is compassionate, they're going to have great friendships. We know scientifically that if a young person practices compassion, they'll be able to handle stress better, right? We know scientifically if the young child or a young person is compassionate, they're going to do well at school, right? They're going to do well when they go to work because they know how to build ties, know how to collaborate and cooperate with people. And of course, that made me think, like, well, how do I teach my kids how to be compassionate, you know? And I think there are a few things. One is through touch, you know, that if you really think carefully about your parenting and you're soothing your child when they're crying and you're watching them soothe a doll who they're pretending is crying, or you're wrestling and you're sort of rough and tumbling like a lot of parents do with their kids, like I did, and then you have this playful, affectionate touch, or you're carrying them around and letting them look at the world. Let's say you're at a museum or out at a park. Those expressions of touch are really lessons in compassion, right? Just about soothing and being comfortable and sort of adapting your behavior to other people. You know, the second thing that was really fundamental, and it really struck me, is stories. Children's books, stories you tell about your past. Kids love bedtime stories. Around the world, they love to have mom or dad tell a story, read stories. And a lot of the great stories are about compassion, right? They're about kids who are suffering. They're about in your own life when you struggled. They're about when a friend of yours struggled, how you worked through that. So stories are fundamental to that. And you know, the third thing that I think is so important for kids in industrialized Western cultures is to not shy away from the suffering of the world. You know, we as parents very often will, you know, if you hear about starvation in another country, or you hear about refugees, or you hear about torture, or you hear about species that are disappearing, right? Elephants or what have you. Very often our first impulse is to shield our kids from those experiences of suffering, and I think that's wise early on. But I think after a certain age, you want to get your kids to think about harm in the world, right? Suffering in the world. And I know it sounds counterintuitive, but when kids have amazingly strong capacities for compassion, and if you can get them to think about hunger, poverty, which we have a lot of in the United States, it will activate these strong compassionate tendencies. So I think it's really important for parents to, in a very careful, thoughtful way, to sort of take on those issues at the dinner table and get their kids to reason about them, because it's what we're here to do. One of the most important things that parents do is they model behaviors, right? They are embodiments of what their kids could be. And kids look at them and they're like, how should I be an adult in the world? And I'll act like that guy over there or that woman over there. And so I think that, what I always tell adults when I teach human happiness is like, find one source of suffering in the world, hunger, unfair criminal incarceration in the United States, a problem with species, vanishing trees, whatever it is. Find a problem and devote some energy and some resources to it. Be altruistic. We know it makes you happier. And I think that kids get a lot out of seeing their parents engaged in the problems of the world. It's inspiring. My mom was always worried about the poor, and she would teach, she'd volunteer in prisons and go teach writing in prisons. And when I started to see that as a young kid, I was like, that's what we've got to do, right? So it's important to role model this stuff as well. This is one of the most striking things. It has to do with all of these discoveries of the selfish benefits of being selfless. And I was teaching my human happiness class here at Berkeley, and I got to synthesize this literature, and it's really striking. So there's and I think you could think about it as two different kinds of benefits. Okay, first, three kinds really. The first is what happens to your feeling, right? Your neurophysiological state when you're good to other people. And one argument might be like, wow, I'm being good to somebody. Maybe they'll take advantage of me or screw me over or whatever, and I'll feel worried about it. That's totally not what you see in the scientific studies. And here's what happens, and it just astounds me, these studies, which is that there is a reward circuit in your brain that involves dopamine, right? And it's the nucleus accumbens projecting to the prefrontal cortex, involving the ventral tegmental area in the middle of your brain. And that kind of is the circuit that dopamine moves through. You get a nice massage, you have sex, you listen to beautiful music, dopamine is activated, right? Well, there are all these studies showing if I give money away, dopamine is activated. If I cooperate with you and try to help you out, dopamine is activated. If I just practice kindness, right? I say nice things to you, dopamine is activated. So the first benefit of being good is it ends up making you feel good. If I'm kind or sharing or helping somebody in need and I walk away from that situation, I feel good. And now the studies are showing that this is happening all the way down to dopamine circuits in the brain. The second benefit, and this is really surprising, is, there's this idea out in the literature like, being a good person is for suckers, right? Nice guys finish last, kind people don't succeed in life. You got to be ruthless to make it. And in fact, there are a lot of new studies that are showing that if I'm kind, I do better at work, I have a better reputation at work, I get more influence opportunities at work, I have stronger relationships, my reputation in social groups amongst my friends or my neighbors is more positive, right? So there are these really striking social benefits of being good that reinforce that tendency to be good. In fact, there's just a paper out now showing that if you're a teenage guy, you're 16 years old and you're a young male, you're going to get more dates if you're kind, right? And that is persuasive. And then the third benefit of being kind is health, right? We know, if I volunteer to help people, I live longer. If I share resources, my cardiovascular system looks better. If I practice a lot of cooperation, my daily physical symptoms are better, right? So just your physical health is more robust when you're practicing kindness and cooperation. So pretty good evidence for being good. There are these different models of human nature, right? And there's, like in many veins of Buddhism, there's the idea that the basic mind, the default setting of the mind is compassion, right, is kindness. And I think that I've talked about a lot of data that suggests that in my natural state, I share with people, I'll help them out, young kids will volunteer, I'll be empathetic and compassionate, and I'll even sacrifice my own well-being for other people. But at the same time, there are other models of human nature which are really much different, that we're ruthless, we're violent, we're greedy, we're competitive, we're fickle, we are misanthropic. And when I wrote Born to Be Good, what really struck me is that is a very deep vein in Western thought, right? The idea that people are competitive and nasty and don't care about others in a fundamental way. And I think a lot of it has to do with the context in which those ideas arose, right? When you think about medieval Europe and you think about Renaissance Europe, they were plagued by plagues where, the plagues would rip through Italy and kill a third of the population. They were plagued by very violent politics and slavery. And so that was a cultural context where you might not have done as well to be a good person. You might have done better by being bad, if you will. But today it's really different. And so I really think that we have to think about the cultural context in which these ideas arise. And one of the things that we know when you translate that to your home and your family and the emotional life of what's going on in that home is, when a child has a sense of abundance, of affection, they'll feel really good about the world and hopeful and optimistic. And so a lot of the things that we've been talking about are easy ways to give the child the sense of abundance. Touch, play, nice eye contact, affection, proximity, just being close. Really simple, ancient stuff that makes the child feel like, we call it secure attachment, right? Like this, I'm safe, there's plenty of affection and love, the world is good. And then you go to the other kind of context where it's, the child doesn't feel like there's reliable care. It feels like there's an environment of scarce affection, right? Or unpredictable affection. And then if you grow up in that context, you'll feel as though things aren't as robustly available. You're not as confident about things. So, when I heard about the attachment literature and the importance of security and abundance of love, that changed my life, right? That made me realize, there's nothing more important you give your kids than just steady, easy affection. It's more important than money. It's more important than intellectual content. It is the foundation. And it has to do with creating a sense of abundance. It's so interesting when you raise kids in the world that we live in. It's a hard-working, complex, stressful world, right, today, in most industrialized cultures. You have all these ideas about what do you want to give your children, right? Do you want to give them genius, musical abilities, be a great athlete, make a lot of money, be successful? And most parents, when you really press them, they will tell you what they most want is their kids to be happy, right? And this is really brought into focus. Like if your child goes through a health problem or a psychological issue and you really work through it, there's going to be that voice in your head that says, the thing I want most for my kids, I don't care about anything else. I want them to be happy. And that is a very sound conviction, right? Because we know when you study happy kids, feel content or playful or kind, they're getting along better with other kids at school, they're concentrating in class, they're doing good things on the playground, they're not getting into trouble, they're not harming themselves. So happiness is this great tool for young kids. And when I was raising my daughters, in a really competitive, stressed out American environment. It was really interesting because at first I thought, what I really want them to do is to be great scholars. And after that, after working through that, I was like, no, what I really want my kids to have, to find, to pursue, is happiness in whatever variety it comes to them, right? My older daughter, it's more about awe and wonder and, intensity, right? For my younger daughter, it's about social affection and friends and sort of play. And so I just wanted them to be happy, for very good reasons. It was so interesting. Like, I think that when I was teaching the happiness literature and thinking about being a parent in my classes, there's a lot of stuff you can do to make your kids happy that we've talked about. You can play with them, you can tell good stories, you can touch them, you can spend time with them, you can be near them, and so forth. But underlying all of that, the common thread to play and to storytelling and to eating together and exploring the world together is this sense that your children will develop in each of those contexts, that my parents are always behind me, that they always believe in me, right? That they love me. And it's so much more important than philosophical lessons that you give your kids, reading them great poetry or whatever it is you think you're going to give them. At the foundation is just the sense of, like, when they look at you, you look at them with affection and love, and that they know as they move through life, right? And my kids are now moving on to their own phases of life, that you're there. You are there loving what they do. So that sense of unconditional love and kindness from parents cuts through everything that we do, right? When it goes well, and it's often much simpler than you might imagine. Just taking a little bit of time and being close to your kids. We live in a world where, for some people, for some parents, it's easy to give their kids the sense of unconditional love. They have the resources, they had loving parents, they're in a strong relationship, and it's easy to love your kids, right? For other people, it's not as easy. Maybe, and we know from the developmental literature, maybe one of their parents died when they were young, and that's a trauma that's hard to overcome. Or maybe they came out of a really tough divorce with their parents, or maybe they're really anxious and tense genetically and temperamentally, and those are barriers to providing unconditional love. And for the people for whom it's really easy, I think you just rely on your instincts, right? All you have to do is you just have to say, stay close to your kids, have fun, and it'll happen, right? For the people for whom it's harder, we are learning that there are, I think you have to treat it like a regime, an exercise regime, where you say, okay, this is probably the most important thing I do. Here's this new baby. Feels awkward. I've got all this baggage from my past or what have you. And so what are 5 things I can do and build up these habits that make me a better parent? And so we know reading stories and telling stories with your kid. We know play is fundamental, play and laughter, right? We know just being in relaxed physical proximity with your child, touch, being close by is great. We know that just reminding yourself to listen really carefully to your child, empathetically, making eye contact, asking good questions, right? Listening to what they say is huge. It's fundamental to your child feeling loved. So what I always believe in this kind of deep question of, like, how do I give my child unconditional love, and how do I do it if it's hard for me, is it's just like any human practice. It's like eating good food. It's like learning how to play football well. It's like learning to play the guitar. It's just a set of habits that you need to really commit to early on. And today's society makes some of those habits hard, right? We're very busy. We got cell phones. You got to like clear out the space so that you can engage in those practices with your kids. That's such a good question, which is, it's really important. And a lot of parenting experts, well, it's really important not only for parents to give their kids a family environment that'll make them happy, but it's also really important for a lot of different reasons for the parents themselves to give themselves opportunities for happiness and to build their happiness, right? A lot of parenting experts will say, the first lesson in family life and to being a good parent is to treat yourself well, right? Or to put on your oxygen mask, first so that you can take care of the child. And I really believe that's true. We know from the literature on depression that if you're really depressed, it's harder to parent well. We know from the literature on secure attachment that if I feel securely attached to the world, my kids will feel securely attached. So I think it's fundamental, and a lot of the wisdom that we've learned in the science of happiness has to do with, knowing that when you're going to be a young parent, you're going to be tired, you're not going to have as much romance with your partner, you're going to be scrapping a little bit more, you're going to maybe have some more financial struggles. There are a lot of stresses with being a parent, and so you got to really actively use this science of happiness to make sure that you're doing okay, right? Practice gratitude, practice some mindfulness, practice getting outdoors and experiencing awe on a regular basis. Just make sure that you're taking care of yourself, because that will then spread to your kids. When I teach human happiness here at Berkeley and then in our online class, I think that there are some really straightforward, intuitive, powerful exercises that young parents can engage in that can really help them be happy. One is gratitude. So I think it's a really powerful technique, and we know it's been tested by science that a couple times a week, maybe you're going to sleep, or you're just waking up, or you have a little moment in the day, just take a minute, take some deep breaths, and just think about 2 or 3 things that you feel grateful for. And you'll probably feel grateful for the health of your child, or the opportunity to serve them good food, or the chance to have a nice vacation with your kids, or whatever the case may be. But really practice gratitude. The second one is kindness. There's a rich literature. It really comes out of Buddhism. It's tested in scientific studies. Kind of these loving kindness techniques. Again, get into a quiet space, breathe deeply, let things slow down, feel sunlight or hear the breeze, and then just think kind thoughts towards people. Just remember that other people suffer. They want the best for their kids like you do. They are trying hard, and just sort of cultivate these feelings of kindness. And the third one that is really important to me and our lab right now is to get outside and find some natural beauty, right? We're finding little walks outdoors, look at the trees, look at a beautiful view, a sunset. Helps your immune system, it helps your happiness. These kind of awe walks or wonder walks. So really, take a moment a couple times a week just to give yourself 5 minutes of walking in a place that's pretty and beautiful, and you'll derive a lot of benefits. So I always think that if you can practice a little gratitude, practice a little kindness, sort of find sources as you're moving around in the world of awe and wonder, you're going to be okay as a parent. One of the reasons and people know this in their bodies and they feel it intuitively, that when you go outside and you practice awe, or you practice gratitude and you feel thankful for things, one of the reasons that people are turning to these practices is that they actually have been shown in really rigorous studies to help your health and happiness. So studies with gratitude just a simple once a week, like write down a few things you're grateful for. Weeks later, you'll get boosts in happiness, you'll get boosts in how physically strong you feel, you'll sleep better, you're going to have a better romantic relationship. There are new studies coming out showing that it actually is good for your cardiovascular system. So a lot of these practices, even though they seem really simple, and not complicated, they have these big benefits for your health and your happiness. One of the things that's really important, and I think it's one of the real, I think it's one of the inappropriate directions that people take positive psychology. Because people who, when you study positive psychology and you learn about gratitude and beauty and hope and optimism and, awe and compassion and kindness, you think, well, that's all of what social life should be like. That's all of what parenting should be like. And one of the things that you really have to grapple with as a parent is that you're going to have a lot of conflict. You're going to have a lot of stress. You're going to get really angry with your kids. They're going to get really angry with you. You're going to see your two loving kids fight with each other, right? And it is exhausting, But the first thing that you have to remember is conflict by design is part of human social life, right? Your sibling, your two daughters, they have their own identities that they have to claim and they have to struggle for and sort of engage in conflict about with their other sibling. You as a parent are going to have conflicts with your kids, but it's healthy to do so. So it's important to realize that that's natural, and more importantly, it's important to be easy on yourself and kind to yourself when your family struggles, right? All families struggle. It is part of growing up together. You need struggles for kids to develop into their own identities. And so just be kind to yourself. Practice some self-compassion. Remember that conflicts are part of family life. It's okay to be angry at your kids. It's okay to be upset about things. That's part of family life too. And the minute you go a little bit easier on yourself, the struggles aren't as powerful. When you teach happiness, like I do at Berkeley and around the world, it always boils down to the question of like what can you as a parent give your kids, right? In a way, that's the hardest and most important question that we face. And to me, it really boils down to three things. The first is to help in a really gentle way your child kind of envision their core passions of life, right? We find our happiness through positive passions like compassion or wonder, gratitude, justice. These are old passions that make us happy and fulfilled. Children have different passions about the world. They may have different passions about the world than you do as a parent. And so your first task is really to kind of get them to find what those core passions are. Is it about nature? Is it about injustice? Is it about play? Is it about material life, what have you, or sensory pleasure? Find your passion. Second thing is give your child the sense of community, right? Give them the sense that there is a cause or a social community that they can be part of that's bigger than who they are, that they should be finding and exploring in their lives. And it may be a family, a neighborhood, a political cause, a sporting team, a family tradition, but find ways in which your child learns about folding into communities. And then the third is give your child one tool to handle stress, right? They're gonna, adolescence, when a child is 14, it is really stressful. The world is more stressful today than it was 30 years ago. The economy is harder. Political circumstances are a little unstable. We worry about climate change. The 18-year-old is more anxious, studies show, than the 18-year-old was 30 years ago. And we know stress is hard on people, so you got to give your child one way to handle stress. It might come through writing. It might come through meditating. It might come through play and sports. But find out what it is that really they find calm and peace, and then build that up. And again, it's going to be different than what you like. It may be the same. My older daughter and I find calm through being out in the mountains. So figure out what that way to handle stress is. So core passions, community, handling stress. That's the best we can do.